Season's over and the Firebirds didn't finish 0-16, so I consider that a win. They finished dead last in the division, and at the moment, it's not a very strong division. A 9-7 record was good enough to get the Colts into the playoffs, where they took on the Cleveland Browns based on their final score, 36-33. This would have been a fun one to watch, as the Colts are my division rivals, and I use rivals loosely. I want them to lose. They took on the Steelers in the divisional round, where they would get clobbered 32-15. The Patriots-Chargers game looked like a good one. Carney kicked the game-winning field goal in the final minute to get them into the AFC Championship. I personally hate 3 of the 4 teams in the championship round. The Steelers beat the Patriots 27-19, while the New York Giants were mollywopped by the Saints 52-24. Steelers meet the Saints in the Super Bowl. Who do you think's going to win? 23-20 overtime. Imagine how amazing this game would have been to watch. Breeze touchdown pass to Henderson with only 4 seconds left in the game. Steelers should have probably won, but they didn't, and now New Orleans has 2 Super Bowl titles to their name. Before we move on to the offseason, let's look at the standout stats. Pennington was supposed to be our veteran presence. He was not very good. Our best quarterback by quarterback rating was Winter, and he didn't even have a passing touchdown. We will definitely be looking into a quarterback this offseason. Tiki Barber should have been given the ball more, but he also had issues with fumbling early on in the season. Those are still respectable stats, but I don't know if he'll return next season or retire. If he does, we don't really have talent behind him. Terrell Owens had a similar season to Barber, not used enough, but put up respectable numbers. We also signed Joey Galloway, but he had gotten injured and didn't play as much as I hoped he would. We need more talent in this area. We need talent all over the offensive side of the ball. The offensive line looked respectable except for Rucker, who allowed 12 sacks. After looking at all these numbers, all I can say is I'm firing the offensive coordinator. Now the defensive side. Welch was wrecking havoc all season long. For a defensive tackle, 16 sacks is extremely impressive. He was a bright spot on this team. He ain't no cupcake, he a birthday cake. There weren't too many turnovers. McElveen, if you recall, had 2 interceptions against the Titans in the final week of the year to help get their second win ever. Other than those 2, no one really stood out. One last thing, we did get sponsorships. Our stadium is now called the Nicely Fitted Menswear Stadium. Hopefully in 2 years we can get an 8-win season. I'd hate not to meet that expectation. Remember, I told you we were going to fire our offensive coordinator? Well, he's fired. We went ahead and hired Isaac Cummings, and hopefully he can squeeze something out of this offense. Surprisingly, only 3 of the 5 veterans we signed retired. Joey Galloway, Tiki Barber, and Terrell Owens, which I'm hard-pressed to say both Barber and Owens could probably still go for one more season. The other 2 veterans were Chad Pennington and Keith Bullock. Of course, my guys weren't the only ones retiring. Jason Taylor with the Bills, Brian Dawkins, Rondé Barber, Darrell Washington had a fractured vertebrae and had to retire after 2 years in the league. Mike Rabel, actor Thomas Jones, John Kitna, Keith Brookings, Ricky Williams, Mark Brunell, Donald Driver, Ray Lewis, Al Harris, London Fletcher, Lawyer Malloy, Brandon Stokely, James Ferrier, Hines Ward, Kerry Collins. That's a lot of players. Of them, 3 went to the Hall of Fame. Rondé Barber, which I'm sure Tiki Barber is upset he's not on the list. Ray Lewis, who I believe no one's going to argue why he shouldn't be there. And lastly, Jason Taylor, who finished his career with the 1 sack in Buffalo. As the owner of the Firebirds, I'm upset Terrell Owens isn't on the list. Now we get to the meat and potatoes of the video. The re-signing period. Pennington, he ain't coming back, but Winter would be a good backup, a safety net just in case we can't draft or sign a decent quarterback. He wanted a long-term contract, but I gave him a 1-year prove-it deal. Just in case we have to start him again and he does terrible, we can move on. Our next big signing was Rayshawn Brantley. He's our starting center, and I hate to look for another guy. He's young, so we offered him a 4-year deal, which he rejected, but eventually after raising the offer, he accepted. We also had to re-sign our left guards because we had none under contract next year. The plan I have is to re-sign both Riley and Marshall, then move one of them to a position that needs the help. Worst case scenario is we have a good backup. Now this may have been a mistake, but I felt the need to re-sign Justice Rucker at the right tackle position. Even though he had the worst performance out of all the offensive linemen, he even rejected my first offer. But no one rejects me, so I threw more money at him because I like to have more problems. Now we're going to the defensive side. Remember, I told you Keith Bullock hasn't retired yet, but I chose not to bring him back right now. I want to see if there's anyone in the draft. I did re-sign Jacoby Spain for a backup position. He was cheap. We don't have a lot of good corners, and corners are really hard to find, so I don't know what I was thinking, but I decided to overpay for this mediocre cornerback. I recorded this during the summer. The last signing was for the strong safety position. We don't have any under contract for next season. I really like McElveen. Even if his ceiling isn't that high, I believe he's a decent backup who can play when called upon. He wasn't cheap, but I like the dude, so screw it. Here's your final chance to say goodbye to all the players I'm not bringing back. Next up was free agency, where we tried to sign Randy Moss and Jimmy Smith, but they both accepted offers from other teams, and to be honest, there was no one I really wanted in free agency that I thought would help me out, so I didn't sign anyone and skipped to the draft. In the first round, I seriously considered a running back, Shaden Moore, who I scouted, but I really didn't want to have Winter be our quarterback this season. So I took Kevin Paul with our first overall pick, and with the quarterback you need a receiver, and in the second round we selected Bondre Crawford, who I believe will be very good. From here on out, every selection was a backup choice. Skylar Wright for the backup right tackle, Norwood as depth for the running back position, Kudus at safety, Sanders for a chance to play at defensive end, and the 7th round pick, Antonio Griffin at safety in a backup role. We signed all 7 players, Kevin Paul getting himself a 6-year contract with the team, Bondre Crawford 5-year deal. I see these two connecting with each other a lot. The rest of the signings were cheap deals, which doesn't bode well for their ratings, but now the season is underway. Who's excited? The next episode will more than likely have all 4 preseason games together with highlights and cuttings. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, like it, and you'll be hearing me in the next one.